Hey, hi everyone. Mhm. So it's a small group, as Wednesday normally is, but a lot of people are with us in the recording. Um, yeah, I'm really excited about today, and I hope the topic is interesting. For me, it's really relevant. But maybe we can start the call as to the question, what is sleep for you? It's not something people notice until it's asked. Like, for me, sleep is a controversial topic. I have experienced like weird sleep throughout my spiritual journey to the point where I stopped sleeping. So now I'm sleeping a lot more. But then sleep for me is funny. It comes in waves. Sometimes I'm sleeping a lot. Sometimes I'm not at all needing it. So I'd be interested to like listen to you, bring some observations that when you started this work, did sleep become strange or interesting or different? Do you have a different understanding of sleep? That could be in terms of quantity, duration, quality. Are you waking up at night? Are you sleeping sometimes in the day? Or are you experiencing sleep in the process? Are you observing sleep as a kind of consciousness that's beginning to enter the sessions? Okay, so let's open the space just to listen to your questions, your experiences, your insights. Are you starting to gain some understanding of what's happening when we go there, wherever it is that we're going? Yeah, I'd like to hear your ideas. Yeah, just unmute yourself if you would like to share. Like Val, I saw you raise your hand.
I will always raise my hand when I can speak. Hello, thank you, Pi, for the space. Hello, everybody. Oscar, nice to see you, everyone. For me, sleep has totally changed, and one of the things that I'm most grateful for, many, but with through innerdance, I had a point of view that I was a light sleeper, that I would wake up with everything. And then, of course, being at Maya, where you have like a concert on the highest volume every night. And I'm like, well, I not only can sleep, it actually rocks me to sleep. So all the points of views that I had around sleep have definitely gone, and I'm tapping into more of the understanding of what this work does. And it's such a blessing because I mean, without sleep, you're a mess every day. So for me, it's getting me more energized to I've got pretty wild life, so it gets me to be energized so much more. So for me, it's been such a blessing.
Mm, amazing. Okay. Anyone else would like to talk about their sleep? Oscar?
Hi. Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. Well, I was writing a few things, but I didn't finish, but I want to flow with this. Well, initially for me and also in my analysis from how this topic is getting when a big range from your entering for your opening, for me, of course, have in my early ages is have a cultural and biological conditioning because, for example, in my family, the sleeping was very important. You don't disturb people. You make silence. It's an important and sacred meaning and encounter and blah blah blah. And also, of course, it's a way of how my family was taking care and worry about my growth and my development. I was raised with this print on me. But after maybe 20 years ago, for me, the practice of sleeping was starting to become activity. In certain schools and certain practices, we know that it's possible to continuing processes in the phenomena of consciousness even more deeper and more open, with benefits in personal life during the time of sleeping with certain practices. And also this is related to astral or dreaming awake practices, accessing to consciousness, and all these astral projection and exercise that also is a very interesting school about that. And also in the readings was found, and is open for all of us. I'm sure that we all has been crossing this message on media, Instagram or whatever, that we are in the physical life, we are really sleeping. We are unconscious of them, who we are and what we are. And the sleeping time is real, the awakening time when we are not under the same conditioning where we has been functioning as a biological and functional beings in this society, especially in Western society. So also I has been having some challenge. As you notice, since I am in the inner dance family, I always has been participating in topics and conversations when here in my country it's 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I'm not a sleeping person during the last 4 years. But lately, I have to say that this year, I identified the sleeping process as something that has been fighting with myself, because I didn't want to go straight to the calling of sleeping. And just 2 weeks ago, I'm sleeping at 12 a.m., p.m., a.m., sorry, a.m., yes, in the midnight. And I use some mix of magnesiums for relaxing and for brain health. And it has been contributing a lot. And I have to say that it feels amazing. But I also think that we have these circadian rhythms planetary, but also we are entering in another awakening process. So what is sleep in this planetary awakening? Who is sleeping in this planetary awakening? And what means sleeping in this planetary awakening? So also becoming whole, which is what we are trying and studying and containing people, processes for how they can access to their wholeness, what means really sleeping, because through the sleeping process, they are accessing to consciousness, or we are simulating this dream state. So it also has been part of my reflections and maybe another new definitions that I will be updating in my personal offering to people when I invite to the practice. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, we'll keep this conversational. I want to go into an introduction on inner dance in relation to sleep. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Val, both in Mexico. Very amazing contributions. So let's keep this conversational. Anytime you have an interesting thought, a question, an insight, just raise your hand, or you can type it. But this is a really big topic. This is not going to be a one Zoom call. We're gonna need this week. Both calls need to happen to unravel different chapters of this and see how much we can go over today. And then we'll keep continuing in depth in conversation on this. I would like to just open up doorways for you to look at something so taken for granted. Sleep science is actually quite new, and a lot of our understanding in the dream, from a scientific point of view, a lot of it comes only recently. A lot of our understandings on circadian rhythmicity is also quite new. And I would go so far as to guess that a lot of this is becoming relevant because of the changes that are happening in the human. That the human being is changing so fast in the last decades and in the last centuries. So one of the biggest changes we're going to go through, aside from spiritual experiences, lifestyles, food choices, nutrition, we're going to experience sleep differently. And we're going to experience dreaming in a very different way. So I think it's really important that we talk about this. So I feel inner dance accesses the consciousness of sleep. Okay. We emerged from sleep to begin with. We think it begins with consciousness, but when we were in the mother's womb, we were sleeping most of the time, right? And then when we were born, when you observe like newborn babies, how much are they sleeping in totality? Around like as much as 19 hours per day, 20 hours per day. So by 4 months, that might have been reduced to about 16, 17 hours. By 6 months, that would have been reduced to about 13 to 14 hours, which is still quite a lot. It's maybe by the time we are 6 years old that we're now sleeping only about 9 hours per day. But I think there are many findings as of late that are starting to observe that adolescents, like preteens, they actually need a lot more sleep than they're getting, and a lot of problems. Maybe most of the problems that would come up that's emotional and physiological, you can link that to circadian rhythm and sleep disruption problems. So this is where we would go deeper into the practice, but at the same time, this is when we can also leave the practice and start to observe all things human. So it seems like sleep is becoming valuable only recently for a lot of people. Within the sciences, it's only being realized that like shift work, graveyard work, there's something happening in the human that's losing the rhythm. But we need to keep an open mind because there are spiritual awakenings that actually present experiences where people don't sleep. Okay. I'm not going to go into value judgments whether they should have been sleeping or not, but the most intense spiritual awakenings I've seen, which includes mine, actually brought about this manifestation where people weren't sleeping. And you're probably wondering, okay, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like a day? I've seen people go weeks without sleeping. There's actually this man who's here in Maya who's helping do an art project with tiles. I saw him stop sleeping for about a week. I was with him in the hospital. When we study schizophrenics, people undergoing psychosis, something strange happens to sleep. Sleep actually starts to be reduced, or at the very least, certain stages of sleep are reduced, like non-REM sleep gets reduced. REM sleep gets weird. I've seen someone stop sleeping for weeks. It hasn't been that much. I could count maybe in the fingers of my two hands, my observations of people who stopped sleeping for weeks. I stopped sleeping for months, meaning I was averaging super few hours per week, like hours per week, like 5 hours, 10 hours per week. I didn't need much. And I think if we left you alone on an island for a long time, and let's say you are in a raw food diet, you're living in coconuts, you're living in air, you're not around people. I think partly sleep is very social, like what Oscar is saying. Sleep is conditioning. We have many assumptions around what is sleep, how much should you sleep, what is the quality of sleep. We need to keep an open mind, but we need to stay safe and not be irresponsible and just announce to people you don't need to sleep anymore. Sleep is really important. When people don't get not sleep, but there's something in sleep that's needed, that's necessary for survival and thriving. So I would carefully state this, that if you find that very thing that you're looking for in sleep and you can manage it while you're awake, the tendency is you would sleep less and you would not feel tired. So a lot of you probably through intense waves in the journey, maybe you attended an immersion, a training, maybe you went in a retreat, especially when you go on a certain lightening of your diet. People who go vegetarian, people who go on detoxes, people who go on plant-based raw nutrition. The raw foodists actually sleep less. Okay, people who go on fast, they sleep even much less. Like raw foodists can average around 6 hours, 5 hours, and people who go fasting, you can actually live on 3 hours of sleep. This is well documented. So when I fast, I barely need to sleep. So there seems to be an extension of the digestive system, that one of the reasons why we're sleeping so much is because we're eating too much. And so when you're not digesting heavy material, you know, like we're spending so much time on food consumption, food production, food digestion. So this might go together, that when you present the spiritual process, diet becomes important. But I don't want to go too far into that. That's already veering into other domains. I'm interested more in sleep within the spiritual process, particularly in inner dance. Okay, so I think that probably interested you, that we actually emerged from sleep, so that wake is an extension of sleep. So one of the questions I ask myself when I wonder about the nature of sleep, what if you woke up while you were sleeping, but you didn't wake up? What would the world look like through sleep consciousness? You know, it would be interdimensional. It wouldn't look like you live inside time. And I believe that a lot of people in the sessions are actually beginning to visit there. Like sometimes people would say, I don't remember what happened, but so much was happening. Some say, it's like I was in a dream. Some would just say, like, I just came from somewhere, but I knew so much was happening. I was there, but I don't remember. So I feel that's beginning to tap into sleep consciousness. And I believe that evolution would lead us to there, so that we don't need to sleep in order to go into those dimensions. As a facilitator, there's a lot of science in what we do, and sleep science paves the way. When you bring someone into, okay, let me use this word because this is where it becomes relevant, the word trance. Like, how do you define a trance anyway? How do you bring someone into a trance? I feel you actually need to put a part of the person to sleep. Something needs to go to sleep while something stays awake. And when you do study REM states, which has another name like paradoxical sleep, you actually are able to wake something up when you go to sleep. Like something wakes up when you're sleeping. Now, for in ancient times, like we didn't actually know that, so that sleep was very commonly observed as blanking out. Like sleep is let me go, maybe let's go to the screen because we're used to wait, is it let's go to the screen because we're used to mapping things out in the image, and it's a good practice. Okay, so this is what we try to unravel. Now, when you do the journey, the process, when you conduct a session, something needs to go there. But I think the point, yeah, I remember the point that I was trying to make now is in ancient times, before, let's say, neurology, before more inquiries, especially the neurological, especially the EEGs, sleep was understood as a shutting down of both the body and the mind so that we could reset. But when there was the advent of the EEG, especially, we understood that something actually turns on, that there's something in the mind that turns on when we're sleeping. And this is what REM sleep is all about. This is what the dream state is all about. So we realized that sleep is actually not a shutting down. Something actually turns on. So I think to be able to frame a long conversation about this, we need to understand what turns on and what turns off. And there are many correlations with the dream state and the work that we do. The inner dance is very, very similar to REM sleep consciousness, but it's also opposing REM sleep consciousness. There are enough correlations with REM, but there are so many differences with sleep REM and inner dance. So to understand that, we also need to go to an understanding of what is wake. What does it mean to be conscious? Okay, what does it mean to be conscious? What does it mean to be unconscious? So I would say then inner dance and whatever it is that you call the work, life force, energy, kundalini, shakti, something, something. It's this line. It's the space in between. It's more the line. Inner dance, for me, like what I uncovered alone and what I was sharing to so many people after experiencing it myself, I went in between sleep and wake. Okay, this is what you would hear people say a lot. Like I'm not sleeping, but not awake either. And so what about like both? If it's like I'm not sleeping, I'm not awake. What about something is sleeping and something's awake at the same time? So we would need to study. Okay, when we go to sleep, then something has to shut off. Okay, certain elements responsible for wake, and then when we're awake, what do we need to give up? In other words, when we go to sleep. And if you are able to find that out, you would actually start to understand what it means to be awake. Okay. So this is really paradoxical. When you go through an awakening experience, something also something shuts down. It could be the filtering mechanism, the ego, the mind, fear states. Something does go to sleep when you wake up, but something wakes up when you go to sleep. So we're going to be looking at those paradoxes. And I don't think that would become clear if we stay in the figurative. So I would still love to bring up some science, some neurology, some brain states to understand what is shutting down and what is turning on. And then I feel that this is what we're doing. We're actually turning on the off function, and we're turning on the on function, even to a much higher degree. Okay, this has always been the work that we do. Like off and on switches are simultaneously co-activated, which I would say is actually quite rare in the wake state consciousness. In when you're awake, it's either you're on or you're off, or you're a little bit off and then you're a little bit on, but they don't normally co-activate like with each other. So facilitators, whether they know it or not, this is actually what we're doing. We're learning to conduct the switches. And I think if you have more awareness of what might be called it's actually called the flip-flop switch. And to be more specific, it's called the hypothalamic flip-flop switch. There's like an inverse relationship between the off and the on for, like whatever reason. It's actually better to not be on all the time. We need to turn off sometimes. But in my experience, when you're able to to do this simultaneous co-activation, this is when you sleep less. I for so many years wanted to give this to people because like I'm observing humans and I'm just seeing they're sleeping so much. Sleeping so much. It's like 1/3 of the day. It's like 8 hours a day out of 24 hours. It's like a lot of time. And here I was. I would be awake like 4 o'clock in the morning at 11 p.m. and I'm doing what I need to be doing. I'm playing music, doing research. I'm creating websites and I'm just there. It's like I'm not tired. I really like this. Sometimes I'd sleep 2 hours a day. So I felt there's so much human potential, and we're putting a lot of that into La La Land to just like switch off, to escape. So for many years, I would say maybe 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, especially after my time on the island, where everything was energy, everything was the universe, everything was just this non-dual state, and my mind wasn't thinking. I really didn't have sleep. One of the reasons why I needed to sleep was because I had kids, and then I had to assume the rhythm. I had to acclimatize to the rhythm until I started to sleep more and more and more. Now I enjoy sleep, but the online coursework actually helps me to go back to my old lifestyle because I have to wake up at like midnight, then conduct like a Zoom course at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm awake until 5. I have a little bit of a nap. I'm happy to weird out my rhythms. I'm okay with that. I don't mind experimenting. I don't mind treating my body as if it was Frankenstein's monster, and I'm Dr. Frankenstein. I don't mind that. We actually have to thank a lot of the early researchers. Let me know if you can't see the screen, because there's a lot of early researchers that really did a lot of experimentations with.
It's okay, the
With-
screen.
Okay, thank you. So there's I'll mention a few early sleep researchers just to say thank you to them. One of them is Nathaniel Kleitman. He was probably the first one who put some emphasis that, hey guys, we need to look at this. And this is what he did. He and his assistant basically lived inside like a cave, and in the absence of light, they had to go into the deeper recesses of Mammoth Cave. Let's maybe look at some pictures of this, just so we're let's look at the Graz website later. Mammoth Cave. So these guys really just wanted to know what would it be like to stay in a place where there is an absence of the dark and light like cycle. So they experiment. I think it was about 30 plus days where the temperature was quite constant. And based on this, we found out that humans, like other mammals, have diurnal rhythms. Like we have a circadian rhythm that no matter the temperature or light dark stimulus, like there's something called the biological clock. So when I say I'm experimenting with myself, I can understand like these guys. I think more than that, I would maybe pay attention to some of the other ones who worked with Kleitman and had found out some other important and interesting things. Like the first one would be one of his assistants. His name's Eugene Aserinsky. I'd be interested in his work just to say thank you to him. Basically, I honor him because he stayed up at night. Okay. during those hours when everyone else is sleeping, they would have people like laying down, like on the beds, and they would be observing what's happening in these individuals. And these were before the EEGs became available. So what Aserinsky noticed was when people were asleep, um, the eyes were moving. The eyes are moving rapidly. Not all the time. There would be bursts of random eye movements that would take place every so often. And it was quite interesting how they would keep waking someone up. Okay. Okay, the eyes are moving, wake up, and then they would start to ask questions like, what's happening? And they realized that most of the time when dreaming is happening, it's when the eyes are moving. They say thank you to Azarinsky for that. Like another person who worked with Kleitman is William Charles Dement. He's got like quite a lot of interesting work, and he was the one who gave us the stages of sleep. So through him, we have an understanding at the very least that there are two very basic classifications of sleep. It's either the eyes are moving or the eyes are not. And when the eyes are not moving, it seems like there are still several stages there, like non-REM 1, non-REM 2, and non-REM 3. So right now we know a lot more than the early findings Kleitman, Sierensky, and Dement had given us. I think it's actually quite cool to still channel them, when things were still quite simple. Like a lot of their initial findings in the 1950s, 1960s, they were quite cutting edge. And yeah, we have them to thank for. Prior to Kleitman, like sleep wasn't actually that interesting, and Kleitman was quite prominent when Sigmund Freud also was looking at dream space, like the interpretation of dreams was published around the time that that Mammoth Cave experiment was happening. So it seems like this was the time when humans became more and more interested in sleep. But I think let's go back in history and observe maybe what was happening in the human being around this time. I think we were getting interested in sleep around this time because that's when sleep was like changing. Okay, let's go way back. Let's say what were the elements that like shifted like sleep. Okay, like let's go back to Europe. Let's say in the early 1800s. Like it was in 1807 when London began to introduce the gas-lit street lamp. And some years after that, cheap and plentiful lighting became available, initially in Europe and then the Americas, and now it's all over the world. I think what's important there is it was in the 1800s that the word insomnia first came into use. Like prior to that, there wasn't actually such a thing. So it seems like when we got exposed to light at those times of the day when we are supposed to be exposed to darkness, something already happened to our rhythms. And in fact, like there was a prime minister in Britain who resigned like in the late 1800s, primarily because like he couldn't sleep, like he had severe insomnia. So there was an epidemic back then. There was a new sickness. Insomnia was an epidemic. It was a disease that was not known. It was unknown. And up until today, insomnia is ailing us. So yeah, like a lot of changes. And this is during, as you know, like in the Industrial Revolution, it sleep needed to be managed. So one of the more interesting things when you look at the old literature, a lot of people would probably be assuming that long continuous sleep is normal. But prior to the Industrial Revolution, when you look at the literature, people would not really be doing long continuous sleeps. Like entire families would have like the first sleep, and then they would wake up, they would do some activities together, and then they would have a second sleep, and then they would have maybe as much as a third sleep. So there's such a thing called like a biphasic sleep, and then there would be polyphasic sleep. So this is just for those of you, and I'm sure there are those of you who are waking up at night and maybe you're going into judgment, like maybe something's wrong with me. And in ancient times, prior to the sort of work modes that people have to commit to, like every night, okay, I need to go to sleep because I need to wake up every morning to go to school or to go to work. If you're experiencing first, second, and third sleep, that may not be so bad. So don't be judgmental. If you're going through that, there might actually be a function, and this is still being studied today. This is just for us to keep an open mind that there might be reasons why in the rhythmicity of wake and sleep, okay, whatever time of the day it might be happening, you might be harvesting certain things that are available when, let's say, are we looking at cortisol, rhythmicity? Are we looking at melatonin? Are we looking at testosterone, estrogen? Or are we looking at core body temperature? There are certain things available when temperature is high and temperature is low. So one of the reasons why you actually do go to sleep is to help you manage your core body temperature. So for example, if you wake up, let's say this might be 3 o'clock in the morning. Some of you might be waking up at 2 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. So let's say this might be when core body temperature is at its lowest, which is also when, let's say, melatonin might be at its highest. There's a lot that you can accomplish when core body temperature is low and melatonin levels are high. This is also when cortisol levels are super low, which is the stress hormone, right before it starts to go up. So instead of trying to force yourself to go back to sleep, you might want to treat it as a spiritual person. There might be a spiritual experience there. Why don't you lay down, close your eyes, go into the music? Why don't you pick up your notebook, see what insights might come? Some of the world's most revered geniuses actually use the 3 a.m. moment to, discover either E is equal to MC squared or, paint or, there's so much creativity. There's so much brilliance in the points between sleep. So don't be bothered. Don't be judgmental by evolution that we are changing sleep patterns. Could be interesting things there. We'll go deeper into that. So, this is just maybe a historicity of basic sleep science. There's like a lot more to uncover. Maybe one thing I'd bring up that's science-based that we can go deeper into is there was a lot of experimentations with creating lesions like cutting certain parts of the brain, cutting out or cutting connections between brain parts, just to wonder where is sleep and wake happening. I think this is what we can study, because even if you're not lesioning your participants, people laying down in the journeys, what you're doing is using sound and touch. You are able to stimulate electrical surges, blood flow. You're able to activate neural oscillations in different brain regions. So in the beginning, scientists were looking for what is the part of the brain that creates the sleep-wake regulatory mechanism. So one of the first areas in the brain was found out was the pons. I've been looking at this brain part for quite a while. The pons helps to regulate sleep-wake. It also helps to regulate breathing patterns, so that when you do touch upon certain brain parts, that's maybe in the lower part, let's say in the brainstem, cerebellum, the midbrain, can actually shift people between sleep-wake cycles and breathing patterns, and also heart rate activity. So in the early scientific experimentations, when scientists would create lesions in the pons, they noticed that the differences between sleep and wake became more of a gray area in people. When they cut off this part, that would also cut off connections between the nervous system and the brain itself. Like in the brainstem, there seem to be very, very particular areas of the brain, so that people weren't sleeping during the night. They might be sleeping more and more during the day. They would drift off into wake states during the night. So it seems like there are these parts of the brain that holds a kind of clock. Right now, we know a lot more, especially regarding the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, that contains what's called the clock genes. Okay, there's a whole mechanism in which the clock is managed. So when you conduct an inner dance process, when you get people to lay down, you're actually activating something near the pons. Not just the pons itself. There are areas and structures near the pons that you also activate to activate the clock, to move the clock. Actually, it's like going into these waves. You can actually change these waves. This is one of the first findings in what we do. You can change the wave. So maybe the wave looks like this, and suddenly you're able to either advance the clock so it begins to look like this, or you're able to delay the clock inside people. And that for others becomes more of a spiritual experience. What is actually also a change in the rhythm of core body temperature, of brain waves, of endocrine hormone production and release. So there's a lot that can be learned from here. Okay, so we would study maybe the hypothalamus in the long term, like particularly like the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's not actually that complicated. Just getting people to lay down and then closing the eyes, and then maybe dimming the light source. When you dim the light source to lower lux level. So let's say they came from the outside, maybe it was 1,000 lux, 3,000 or 5,000 lux, and you go into like a darker room. Then when you lower the lux levels, you dim the lighting, already you could be activating the suprachiasmatic nucleus that then would activate the pineal gland to release melatonin that then helps in the dreaming process. So there's so much attention being placed on what kind of technique do I use? What do I do? What do I say? Just through the proprioceptive act of asking someone to lay down, playing soft music, and then asking someone to close the eyes in the absence of light. Okay. In the absence of light, you're already bringing about this illusion that it's nighttime, and already you are able to shift the rhythms of cortisol, melatonin, and a lot of the other hormones and neurotransmitters, as well as core body temperature, and just all the rhythms in general. So one of my realizations over the years is just thinking about temperature, core body temperature. In many of my trainings, okay, like I live in Palawan, we used to have this trainings and healing center called Bahay Kalipay. Some people would come for inner dance. Some people have never heard of inner dance. They just want to go on a retreat, a detox. They want to do yoga. They don't know that Bahay Kalipay is where we were conducting the inner dance trainings. So I would hold these inner dance sessions either in the mornings or afternoons or at night. Now, when people have to fly a plane, okay, I don't know what you were going through when you attended your training. When people have to fly on a plane from, let's say, this part of the world to this part of the world, already something happens when people shift time zones. Basically, when you have to travel that far, for every 1 hour that you shift time zone wise, you actually need to give a whole day. So let's say you traveled and there was a 9 hour time zone difference. It will take you about 9 days to adapt to the effects of what's called jet lag. Okay. Because there is an advancing or a delaying of the clock depending on where you're flying to. Okay. So the longer you are sleep deprived, or the more you create changes in the clock, there are buildups in the body and the brain. There are chemistries, there are circuitries that start to conduct weird, strange rhythms that your body's not really used to. So changing the clock means that you need to pay for this in advance. So there's something called sleep and circadian rhythm disruption, which is an actual disorder that's coming into terms in sleep science. So a lot of people who attended the trainings and the sessions, the sessions actually become powerful because of this jet lag thing, because of the tension that builds up. Like one of the chemicals that's responsible for that is called adenosine. Like the longer you stay awake, the more adenosine builds up, thus building up what's called like a sleep pressure. And then when you also then have like this melatonin built up that's forcing you to go to sleep when you're not able to because you're jet lagged, because your circadian rhythms are fighting, that it's nighttime, you're supposed to sleep, you're in your bedroom, everyone else is sleeping, but you can't go to sleep because this is the time that you're supposed to be awake. Circadian rhythmicity is fighting the current course of sleep wake. So one of the reasons why a lot of the trainings actually went powerful, and this is a big reason as well for how powerful things get for participants who have to fly. It's actually because of the it has something to do as well with core body temperature. So this is one factor. The other factor would be a lot of people would be flying from very cold climates to very warm climates where they would attend the trainings. So maybe someone flew from England to Mexico, someone flew from Lithuania to Thailand. That was my story. When there's a shift from cold to warm, okay, like when people are laying down now, one of the manifestations or instances that you probably might have noticed is people's bodies get very hot, very, very hot. like not even warm. Like I've felt bodies, and people are releasing a lot of stored heat when they're coming from temperate, colder climates. So one of the manifestations of healing is actually the shift from the release of trapped heat. So when that release happens, a lot of the manifestations, whether it be the body moving, emotions, visions are appearing. A lot of that is rhythmic by nature. So I would accredit that a lot of the profound experiences are actually coming from still this tendency for people to a lot of people are also insomniacs. Like when I interview them, when I'm working with them, a lot of them are not actually sleeping well because something's happening at work. They have problems with their family. The inner dance was actually allowing people to rest in very, very deep ways so that what they weren't getting in their sleep time, they're actually starting to get while they're awake. So in a way, we're actually giving people this deep rest. So this is then when an understanding of the sleep stages becomes important. Like, what are the sleep stages anyway? I think it might be easier just to go into reproduced images that are well done. So that, okay, so these are sleep stages. This is what your brain looks like in an EEG when you are awake. And they call REM state dreaming because there are many similarities with the EEG of wake people and people asleep. Okay, so stage one, you relax a little bit. So here you see that the amplitude might be higher, bigger, but you have less frequency in terms of oscillations. There's less oscillations happening on a per second or per minute level. The cycles per second are less. Here you have less cycles per second, and more you can see the waves slow down. Amplitude is high. Okay, you have high power but less frequency. So let's go study today and over the next months what is deep sleep. Another word for that is slow wave sleep, SWS. And there's a journey from non-REM 1, non-REM 2 to 3. Okay, so let's establish that in the sessions, you might be bringing people into N1 and N2, and then into N3, and then REM. I might not go into too many details as to what these might mean because the information is quite easy to to Google or research. There's so many easy videos out there, and I've shared some yesterday for some of the channels. I would love for you to research that. So when we bring people into inner dance, we're trying to achieve some of this. But to get to that, you need to achieve this. Let's go back to the screen. This might be easier to draw out. You need to design a playlisting system that rises and falls.
You are not sharing now.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let's correct that. Thank you. One day I will find out why that happens, but not while we're in the calls. So sleep stages would be non-REM 1. This is what it looks like in inner dance anyway. Let's represent non-REM 1 to non-REM 3 and going into REM state here, which is a whole range of activity before it goes back to REM 2. Let's focus only on non-REM 1 and 2 into non-REM 3. Let's look at the features of that with the clear questioning, how is this sort of like what we're conducting in the inner dance process? Okay. And for those who have been doing Kundalini, there are similarities because the process of Kundalini activation started with inner dance. It was the same framework. Okay, sleep stages wise, let's make more room. Go up there. Not so high up, just there. Okay. So what's happening in non-REM 1, non-REM 2, and non-REM 3? Now for non-REM 1 and 2, sleep is still light and shallow. So it's still easy to wake you up. It's still actually quite easy to wake you up. So when you hear a sound, when someone tries to talk to you, you would still more or less awaken. And also, your body is still moving. There's still movement. There's still light movements. So this is really, really important to point out. That whole study on the pawns was very key because of the insight that something needs to undergo a paralysis, or what's called like an atonia. Atonia is the more scientific term. You know, when you hear the word catatonic or catatonia, it means something is in a state of paralytic slumber. So the atonia would be featured here and also here. Paralysis is a feature of non-REM 3, or let's say non-REM 3 is when it's really being instituted. And then by the time you are in REM, you are paralyzed. You need to be paralyzed in REM state below the neck. So above the neck, there still might be motility or what's called movement. Especially your eyes are allowed to move, but the lower part of your body needs to be paralyzed. And this seems to be, according to science, a precursor to dreaming. So already this is interesting to study in the long term. I can't really unravel this fully, but we need to do this together, like not in this Zoom call. We would do it in the following months. Why is it that we are able to bring people into REM states awake through the process of what is the opposite of paralysis, like the movements that happen in the inner dance, the Kundalini state? Okay, there are these movements, right? And it seems like you can actually bring people into dreaming while awake by doing exactly the opposite of what happens in sleep. I hope you get what I mean. There's a paradox here that for you to go into REM or dream states while sleeping, paralysis needs to occur. And that's something to do with the pons. And we're going to be bringing up something called the reticular activating system, which would be some continuity from 2 weeks before. We bring back dopamine, but we'll add some other chemicals that are important that's belonging to the reticular activating system. It's a whole group of nuclei that do some really interesting things. I just want to bring this up right now that to go into the dream, you need to paralyze while you're sleeping, but to go into the dream while you're awake, you actually need to do the opposite of paralysis. You see where I'm getting at? Already, this is quite interesting. To get someone to dream awake, you need to access vitality, dynamism, alertness. So then when you do study REM, there are certain neurotransmitters that are shut off. Okay. And this is called serotonin. And this is called norepinephrine or noradrenaline. Now, this is the difference between inner dance, which is dreaming awake, and REM sleep, which is dreaming asleep. In the inner dance process, serotonin levels are not shut down, they go high. Norepinephrine levels also go high. Having said this, I'm talking about the classic inner dance experiences, which is now known as well as the Kundalini activation process. We have learned over the last years that it's actually possible to mimic REM sleep so that instead of trying to awaken like emotional or body movement activations, it's also possible to mimic REM sleep so that serotonin levels can also go down and norepinephrine levels can go down. Now, that's a type of inner dance. It's a type of dream state as well. And we're not saying one is better than the other. We're saying that there are different classifications of the energetic process, and a lot of them conduct interesting things. So whether serotonin level goes up or down, norepinephrine goes up and down, they all have benefits, they all have gains. Okay, and we would study them all. They're all quite interesting. Okay, let's go back into simplicity. Let's maybe partially forget that I even brought those up. For now, let's put some benefits here just to slow down and simplify. For you to learn to facilitate, you need to understand initially, okay, let's start with this. Let's say, okay, I want to learn how to bring people into paralysis and atonia, knowing that the technology of the body in waking up REM state is to go through non-REM 3 is called slow wave sleep. All right, slow wave sleep. So let's make this practical and let's connect this with playlisting, music as a device, like touch, the different tools that you use. Okay. Non-REM 3 is very, very important. When you, let's say, these aren't just the sleep stages, this is the inner dance playlist that has these different stages. We're going to share much more stages when we bring up the 12 states that happen in the inner dance journey. For now, let's bring up the 5. Okay, starting with sleep science. It's very hard to go into REM states without going into non-REM 3, but it's very hard to go into non-REM 3 without going into non-REM 2. So remember that non-REM 1, non-REM 2 are the first phases of sleep. They're preparatory phases. That's technically when you're letting go of the tension that you might have built up. You know, all the toxicity of the day, you're absorbing it from other people. This is when you let go. This is when you release. That's one way of understanding non-REM 1 and non-REM 2. And once you've released all of those tensions, those toxicities, those emotions during the day, then you can go quite deep into, delta state. Or there might be a little bit of theta. This is when you really, really just let go and relax. I feel this is when we get closest to death, right? When you study Greek mythology, the god of sleep is called Hypnos, sometimes called Somnus. And the brother of Hypnos, okay, Hypnos is the son of the god of night, who is Nyx, and the god of darkness, who is Erebus. And the brother of Hypnos, who is also the child of Nyx and Erebus, is called Thanatos. And if you know your Greek mythology, Thanatos is death. So the brother of sleep is actually death. And if you want to know who is the son of Hypnos, if you watch the movie The Matrix, Morpheus is the god of dreams. So this is like the the family we visit when we go into the depths of consciousness. Sleep, for me, when you go to sleep, you go to the same place that you visit when you die. I don't see a difference. When I look at this from like spiritual optics, it's actually the same. And for me, that's when you visit upon terminologies like dimensionality, for example, like going into deeper dimensions. I think the reason why we're sleeping is we are missing dimensions that we had come from. You know, this is the source. We came from deep dimensions, and when we awake, then we just go into the third But when you want to go back to the second, the first, or into the fourth or the fifth, you would go to sleep so that you can acclimatize to what is natural in to the soul, to spirit. So facilitators need to learn this, that when you activate N3 in people, you're bringing them into deep sleep, but you're also like killing them. They're dying. So initially you would have songs that would go into the initial release states. So you might start with very, very deep, relaxing songs. So this is Delta. Your first songs would be like down here, and then you would build up towards there. But we want to really just emphasize the fact that there has to be this death or deep sleep phase that a lot of facilitators aren't actually aware of. So when music tries to build up early and then just tries to keep going up and up and up without going into this important like non-REM 3 stage, you're not acknowledging how the human beings are actually designed. So if you really want to access a true like REM state or dream state consciousness, it might be good to observe how the body actually does it, maybe 4 or 5 times a night when we go to sleep. So I think the question in the table is, okay, for you to go into REM, you need to go into non-REM 3. For you to go into 3, you have to reverse engineer, you need to go through N2 or N1. So what is in N1 and N2 that is so important that allows you to go into non-REM 3? Let's go back to the pictures here now. Okay, this is one representation. I think there's some more here. Okay, this one's quite good. So I would look at the sleep spindles the most, also the K complexes. Okay, now sleep spindle formation is getting studied more and more. There hasn't actually been that much understanding. What are these spindles? So okay, in the beginning, the phases of EEG are what you call tonic. So meaning tonic means the brain waves are regular. Okay. And then as you go deeper into REM, stage 2 becomes what's called phasic, meaning you see these irregularities that are not common when you're awake and when you're dreaming. So these irregularities are really important to bring about, number one, like this death-like phase. And then REM would be you experiencing theta, high beta, and gamma. Gamma would be the higher brain states. Can go as much as even high gamma, all the way to 150 hertz, which you cannot achieve when you're awake. Okay, that's one of the reasons why you are dreaming. You're dreaming so that you can raise your vibrations all the way to gamma, which some people do through ayahuasca or magic mushrooms or innerdance. But to normally do that for most people, they need to go to sleep, and that's the reason why we dream. It's not just to see images; it's actually to achieve high gamma. So you need to give something up that is here in order to get here, and this is the giving up, right? The phasic states in stage 1, the irregularity in stage 1, and stage 2 then empties you out. This is like you at your more relaxed. It might look more alive, but it's not. Delta frequencies have high amplitude, but very few, meaning this is what slower brain waves look like. And then it speeds up again here. Now, people who aren't experiencing sleep spindles, if there's no sleep spindle formation, then you don't actually slow down brain waves. Okay, it's kind of hard to represent there. Let's go back to being able to draw this out. The releasing is really important. So if there is an absence of sleep spindle formation And if there's an absence of K complexes, melatonin, for example, isn't so high. It's not released, so people can't really relax. So without N3, this is when number one, like sleep fragmentation happens. This is technically when you keep waking up. And when you keep waking up, it means that you're not able to actually go into REM states. So there are a lot of people who have sleep and circadian rhythm disorders because of that. They're not getting the K complexes, they're not getting the sleep spindles. So when you are conducting like a playlist, okay, here's how it works. So you start out slow, okay, this is slow, and there's a reason why you would build up. Okay, maybe you don't build up as much. Let's say the music builds up only to a certain extent before you drop it again into M3. One of the reasons why you're doing that in innerdance is you're actually mimicking sleep cycle activity where sleep spindles actually start to show up in the process. And that's when people's bodies begin to move. Sometimes that's when emotions start to come up because all of those are significations of release. Okay, so this is where inner dance activity begins to mirror like a sleeping activity, which then is really about how do you go into REM state. Okay, so okay, how do we find useful things here? Getting people to relax. Okay, you create that activation in the pons where you create paralysis, and this is really more to do with the ego death or the surrender state in the inner dance journey. But then when you later build things up, there are other mechanisms at work that you would say are extra to the sleep process that might be more features of the wake process. Okay, that's when you then conduct a space in between. So how do we maybe understand this? Let's go back to the whole history of sleep science. So maybe clean this up a little bit, or maybe a lot bit. Okay, so scientists were interested in, okay, what is happening in the transition? The bonds became interesting. I mentioned the reticular activating system. So initially, we were looking for what parts of the brain bring people to sleep. Yeah, that would already be quite interesting. What parts of the brain bring people to wake state? Now, I'm going to apologize ahead because this is when we bring up complicated terminologies again. Maybe you take time to learn this. But one of the most important brain regions that we would study in the long term is the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus is what I would call a power center. It's a very small region in the brain, but it's probably the most powerful. It's the most powerful center of the brain. And in inner dance, we are activating this power center. And this power center would regulate so many different brain regions. In the last calls, we talked about the limbic system, talked about the neocortex, we talked about the basal ganglia. The hypothalamus would be responsible for endocrine system activity and autonomic nervous system functions. Okay, so right now let's study, before going into the hypothalamus too deeply, we're not going to do that today. Something that came rather early in the study of sleep science is there seems to be a part of the hypothalamus that's responsible for wake and sleep. That the hypothalamus has a wake center and a sleep center. And in the beginning, This was more related to the posterior hypothalamus, which is the back part, and then the anterior part. So when you create lesions in the anterior part, it brings about more sleepiness. And when you activate the wake center, people become alert. They wake up. So there are certain things that you do, especially in relation to music, where you would activate either the posterior hypothalamus or the anterior hypothalamus. Now, we've already established that the inner dance is not just to put people to sleep. May as well just give them barbiturates or sleeping pills, if that's your point. You're not just there to wake them up. May as well just give them 3 cups of coffee. What we're studying is how to activate both the sleep and wake centers of the brain at the same time. Already, that's where we're conducting a paradoxical dream state. Dreaming awake means you actually need to activate certain things that are maintained sleeping while we're sleeping. Now, just to simplify this before going into complex terms, I mean, if you're okay with the complex terms, then the sleep center might be called the ventrolateral preoptic area of the nucleus. The posterior would be the tuberomammillary nucleus. So let's just do acronyms for now. To simplify this, so it's not so complicated. Now GABA is the neurotransmitter that is the most inhibitory. And when you send out GABA to, let's say, part of the neocortex, part of the limbic system, you inhibit or you slow down brainwave activity, as opposed to the tuberomammillary nucleus. There might be many other brain centers that wake people up, but here, what is most responsible is called histamine. If we study the lateral hypothalamus, we would also study orexins or hypocretin. Now, these chemicals keep people awake. So those who are familiar with allergy medicines, like when you take antihistamines, what happens, right? You feel drowsy, you feel sleepy. It's because you are deactivating the histaminergic functions that's sent out through the tuberomammillary nucleus. All right. So the work that we do is quite powerful because when you expose people to music, you can activate like here initially the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, and upon sending out GABA, you can inhibit like motor functions. You can paralyze people. You can inhibit you can inhibit thinking. You can inhibit thought. You can inhibit emotions. That's the power of GABA. But if you wanted to wake people up, then there would be other things. So the VLPO acts in coordination with the pineal gland system, which, as we know, is responsible for sending out melatonin. Melatonin can only do its work so much without the help of GABA. So because this is not really just a course in neuroscience, this is really just to help you understand, okay, why am I playing slow, gentle music? And then when you look at we erased it. When you look at the playlisting system, the circadian rhythms, like when, why, and then when do I play the slow wave sleep music? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just helping you to understand the frames so that you would know what to do on your own. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm teaching you how to think for yourselves. And this is the way to do it. So so this is how it works. And what I'm introducing to you is called the hypothalamic flip-flop switch. Okay, it's very interesting. These two parts, the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus and the tuberomammillary nucleus, they normally cancel each other out. And what we're doing is, instead of canceling each other out, we're learning to co-activate them at the same time. Now, this is to say and we should have started the conversation with this. According to basic psychology and neuroscience, there are three states of consciousness. There's the wake state, there's the non-REM sleep state, and then there's a REM sleep state. These are states of consciousness. This is to say, we are actually introducing a new state of consciousness. Let me say that again, slowly. We are accessing and making possible a new state of consciousness. And I'm not going to name that. It's something we would do slowly in the long term. It could be called wake REM. It could be called, the state of dreaming awake. I don't know. But this is what we're doing because of this co-activation that is quite rare. It's quite rare to activate the sleep and wake centers of the brain. It's very confusing, but this is what we're doing that does bring about this this other model. There are other brain parts that could be interesting in the long term. So let's say when I bring up the reticular activating system, okay, let me try to make this simple, just so it doesn't seem like something we'd run away from. I'm sure this would be interesting for you because of the sheer practicality. These are interesting because we aren't just activating rhythms and brainwave activity. We're activating chemicals. So the RAS, or the reticular activating system, some often called the ARAS. Okay, it's the ascending reticular activating system. These are basically a group of nuclei, and a nucleus is a group of neurons that have specific functions. These ones are mostly responsible for sending out particular neurotransmitters, mostly neurotransmitters. So if you are interested in norepinephrine is responsible for energizing people so that they can work on their problems, staying alert. That which sends that out is called the locus ceruleus, or LC. That's inside the RAS. Number two is, if you're interested in serotonin, understanding now that, okay, this is a particular chemical that needs to be absent during the REM state. Serotonin helps in bringing satiation or relaxation to people, but it's also responsible for modulating awareness. The scientific term for serotonin is 5-hydroxytryptophan. So a lot of this is sent out to the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the cortex. And the part that's sending that out is called the dorsal raphe. If you remember the last call, we actually brought this out, dorsal raphe nucleus. So serotonin we would study like more and more in the next calls. The other interesting one is acetylcholine. Now, you'd be interested in this because when we study the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for resting and digesting, acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that makes that happen. Okay, you want to relax people, you need to send out acetylcholine to the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And this one is really quite expensive. Or the parabrachial nucleus. Don't need to know these, but just I think some people might be interested in the exercise of, say, pedunculopontine, or the parabrachial nucleus. So we already studied the last last week, the ventral tegmental area that releases dopamine. So here you see dopamine is not the only culprit for bringing about the kind of activation. Okay, so dopamine is sent out through the ventral tegmental area. Brought that up last week, the VTA. Okay, so these would be the four main ones that are responsible for sleep. We could still study glutamate later on. Now, let's make this practical. Why would you want to even think about these? So, okay, you are laying down. Now, here's the interesting thing here. Okay, let's say you're still awake. You're there. You're like watching the you're watching the facilitator doing his thing. Something needs to happen to bring about this other state where people are going deep. You know, you notice it already. You're watching a body and you can sense, oh, okay, this person's deep. You just start to learn to tell, okay, this is person going deeper. Is this person still kind of thinking? So something needs to happen here in the RAS, the reticular activating system. Let's study certain other brain parts. Aside from the hypothalamus, hypo means underneath. So what is actually above the hypothalamus is the thalamus. Why would you be interested in this? The thalamus is the sensory hub. I normally like to think of it as the bus station, so that everything that's coming through your senses, right? Could be like light, it could be like sound. There's something interesting here. Okay. Uh, Normally, when you expose someone to extreme noise, or it could still be music, when people are listening to music, normally when they're awake, when their eyes are open, it's still music, but something happens in the process where um suddenly they're not hearing the music anymore. It's not just music anymore. It's entered their field, their body, and they're not, the point is they're not disturbed, right? Where is that? Going back to the thing with the pawns and yeah, the pawns, and so there's something about the thalamus that's going to be important for you to think about, because the thalamus is the gateway. It gates all these other sensations to do with temperature, to do with pain or pleasure. So the thalamus needs to shut down, is what I'm trying to say. The thalamus needs to turn off. Okay. So that's only seeming. The thalamus still would hold like a function, but there needs to be a stage when the thalamus needs to shut down. And this would need to happen in the N1 to N3 stage. The thalamus would once again awaken during the REM sleep stage, but you don't have to think about this too hard to understand that. Okay, I'm making noise, and yeah, people's eyes are shut down, so yeah, they're not seeing anything. But as I'm making noise, there's an irony there. There's like this paradox where when you make noise, there's a point in which people actually experience silence, even when it's noisy. Isn't that interesting? That when you're creating noise, you're noisy, but suddenly people access like an inner peace in the noise. Even when, let's say we're talking about motor functions, when people's bodies are moving, people actually experience a stillness in the movement. And the thalamus also is a kind of hub for interpreting movement. So the thalamus needs to shut down in order for there to be sudden quiet. So the thalamus works from like a bi-directional function, so that like all of these different stimuli are still entering the thalamus before they are sent into the cortex. What the cortex does is, let's say, it sees like colors and shapes, and then it's going to interpret that in the visual cortex, and then it's going to take all this noise and then instead of it being noise, is going to interpret that in the auditory cortex. So something that you need to do is you need to shut down the bidirectional function of the hypothalamus, so that people laying down, they're not like hearing the noise of the world anymore. Like the gating mechanism needs to arise. So one of the interesting things is when you put an EEG onto people, and when you ask them to close their eyes, the alpha rhythm would shoot up initially, like alpha waves would shoot up. And a lot of that is happening in the thalamic, or the thalamus region of the brain. So the answer here isn't crystal. It's not clear cut. You need to think about these excitatory elements, which might be more responsible for waking people up. And then you need to think about the inhibitory elements, especially, let's say we brought up GABA, brought up melatonin, and then we brought up acetylcholine. So it's this versus this. You need a certain balance that initially relaxes people, but what the study of the sleep stages bring about, no, let's improve on this. Say this is what it looks like from an innerdance perspective. This is to point out that in order to get people to be truly in a surrender mode, non-REM 3 or slow wave sleep, you actually need to activate them. There needs to be a rising of activity in N1 and N2. So the sleep spindles, okay, the sleep spindles that show up especially here, and the K complexes, you know what they are? They are actually an interaction between the rising and falling. It's a negotiation process of letting go. It's like, okay, I don't need you anymore. You're tiresome, you're exhausting, I'm going to let you go. So in order to drop in, you know how in the English language they say falling asleep, in other languages people don't actually go to sleep, they don't fall asleep, they just go to sleep. But in the English language, people fall. For you to fall, something needs to rise. So there has to be just enough balance between relaxing elements and stimulating elements. Okay, which is to say, you can't just put people to sleep. In order to get people to inhibit, you need to stimulate them. There has to be just enough stimulation. So there has to be a certain pattern of starting slow. So let's do red. Starting slow, building up, and then dropping before you go high and low here. Okay. It's because of these mechanisms that I'm sharing with you. This is where sleep science can really assist those interested in healing and transformation. But on a regional basis, there's something about the like sensation that would interest you a lot. That in the beginning, they can hear you. They can hear your sounds. They can hear your words. They can hear the music. But at one point, when the thalamus shuts down, this bidirectional activity of the thalamus is gone. And do you know what's responsible for that? What's responsible for that is actually it's the spindles. The spindle seems to be, and this is still being studied, but if there's something that allows for the you remember where it's this one. This is called the hypothalamic flip-flop switch. It's the hypothalamic flip-flop switch. That's both the on. It's either on or off. It's the transition mode between sleep and wake. So this is one of the reasons why the work that we do works. It's because of our ability to negotiate between the masculine and the feminine, high and low, and cold and dark. Okay, so here's where I bring back like a really important concept. Don't underestimate temperature. Your ability to shift people's temperatures will define a lot of what happens in the inner dance process. So let's look at this. Let's look at some images. Okay. Say a chart like this, for example, could be quite interesting. Okay, core body temperature would be yellow. It would be this line right here. And then cortisol would be the green. So as you can see, we can't draw properly. We point out the cortisol levels are at their peak at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's the spiritual hour. This is the most spiritual hour, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then cortisol, the stress hormone, drops at around somewhat before midnight and then rises up again. There are some models where this should actually rise up more around 4 o'clock, between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Anticipating like the waking up stage. Now, temperature is really, really important so that when you conduct a process in people where temperature levels are high, let's say this is when temperature levels are high. When people go to sleep when temperature levels are high, let's put this here. This is when people sleep longest. This is also when REM state or dreaming is longest. So the problem with people doing shift work is when people try to sleep when temperature levels are low, that's when it's actually hard to sleep or to keep asleep. That's when dreaming is the shortest. So this is also to say then when you conduct a process with people when temperature levels are high, your inner dance processes will be a lot more profound. If you conduct a process with people when their temperature levels are low, that's one of the reasons why nothing happens in some people. Okay, so why do temperature level go high? It's because of stress. It's because of seasonality. So let's say temperature levels are high internally in cold places when people are storing a lot of heat. But when people are in warmer places, you don't actually have that heat build up. So this is to let you know if your inner dance is happening at a certain time of the day, you will get different results. Got it? You do it, you do a lot of it here in the afternoon, you would still have a lot of power because cortisol levels are still quite high, temperature is still quite high. Okay, that's already quite interesting. So sometimes the good sessions are happening, it's not because of you, it's because of what time of the day is it or where are people coming from. Now, what would make this all the more interesting is that in many people, because they're experiencing long-term stress, the problem is when cortisol levels don't go low, they just stay high, all day long, then their temperature levels will also be high all day long. And so there's an imbalance there. That's one of the reasons why sessions can be quite powerful for those who live in big cities, whose sleep wake cycles, their sleep circadian rhythms are disrupted. Okay. The reasons why the work that we do is so powerful is because most people aren't sleeping right, because most people are sleeping wrong. So this isn't actually the case anymore. Cortisol levels stay high, melatonin levels stay low. Okay, so maybe I'll stop there because that's already quite a big download. I've got like a lot more notes, but I'm not going to go into, I'll try not to go into everything. Let's study Gra's work as well. She's doing this Wake REM program. Would love to hear from her today. She did her first Zoom call yesterday. She's bringing people in cities mostly who are not sleeping right into an inner dance process that's purely sleep based. So we're releasing like the sleep playlist to people, 30 minutes now, like an hour. She's holding on to quite a lot of feedback that would be interesting for us to observe. What's happening to people when you introduce the playlist while people are sleeping? What's it doing to their brains, to their bodies, to their endocrine glands and hormonal balance and so on and so forth. So I hope this is interesting. I hope this lights up some bulbs inside you for the long term. Let's have a conversation. Any questions, any ideas, any observations would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Hi, Pi. Yep, Jeremy here. So I have a question. So with regards to the new state of consciousness that you're mentioning about, I'm wondering where daydreaming comes into play. Like in the case of, somebody who has inattentive ADHD, right? There's a tendency to just daydream or lose focus. So I'm wondering, like, how would you place it in the framework that you've just discussed with regards to consciousness?
Okay. Here's an interesting study. There were all these like public relations events where people would not sleep in a public area to either raise funds, or David Blaine did that at one point, but before him in the 1960s and 70s, people were doing that. They would try to stay up for like 200 hours straight, which is crazy, right? And then they do it in a public space, and then scientists would like flock these people trying to study what's happening. And by the fourth day or fifth day, what was noticed was people would start to hallucinate. They would go into psychotic episodes. They would exhibit schizophrenic tendencies. So when you study schizophrenia, like I said, people don't actually sleep in the same way. So it seems like you might access dream states while awake. So there are animals that are able to stay awake while they're sleeping. Like dolphins, for example, have this unihemispheric dream ability where they would close one eye and then one eye is open. Because when you're swimming, you need to be awake while you're swimming all the time. You can't just go to sleep. So there are, this is what I want to study. I feel that there are animals that are able to sleep while awake, and I feel that I personally have managed to learn to do that. I have these techniques where I can sleep while I'm studying, or sleep while I'm working. I don't know if this makes sense, but you can actually sleep, and it has something to do with just brain waves. So I think in Singapore that would be quite interesting indeed, because there's so much sleep disruption there. It's like people aren't sleeping in normal ways. So I don't know if this helps. How does it strike you?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious to know, like, as we are daydreaming, we can be awake. Like I could be focusing on a task, and then suddenly I'm just looking out my window and I realize, like, time, I didn't know how much time has passed, and I realized I was not in the present. So is that considered, like being in that wakeful dream state, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel as productive? So I
But
think,
but
yeah.
but another way of reframing the question is, could that be considered a kind of sleep? If you're daydreaming, is there a part of you that's actually sleeping? But then that brings us into innerdance, where while they're in the experience, a lot of them would come out say, I feel rejuvenated. I feel like I've slept for like a week. And then when you do look at the data, when you do observe people, a lot of people don't sleep when we're holding trainings. They can't sleep anymore. It's because they were getting what they were needing, what they needed in sleep, they were getting while they were awake. And a lot of that has to do with emotional release, confronting your fear, looking at the darkness without being afraid.
Okay. I have another question. So with regards to core body temperature, I'm wondering whether holding spaces in, like for example, in the Maya village, I'm assuming there's no aircon, right? But in
There's no
Singapore,
aircon.
when we hold sessions, there's usually the air conditioning, there's a fan. So the environmental temperature alone is really cooler, right? So I'm wondering, like, would it help then to create a better experience or more transformative experience if we didn't have like the air conditioner or the fan as well. Yeah.
I'm not sure about this because I've held so many sessions where it's cold, either in America, in Europe, or there's aircon, but people's bodies get hot. So core body temperature is still an internal regulatory mechanism rather than something that's entrained necessarily from outside. So but knowing this, we probably might go for something medium. Like it's best to not be hot then and not cold, just to allow okay. What I wasn't able to mention is when you do go into REM state, your body gets cold. Actual dream state is when the body gets cold. Now, the inner dance dream state that we're conducting is the body is getting hot because cortisol and norepinephrine and serotonin levels do go high, which normally drops down in REM state. This is a little bit complex. Let me map this out. Wait, no, I'm not sharing screen. There's some complexity here, so I think it's better to look at this from. So normally, when you conduct like a session, it's more like a mini session, which is 90 minutes, which is how long a dream cycle lasts. Some people do 60 minutes, which is an hour. So when you look at this, let's say cortisol would drop here. Melatonin might rise here.
You are not sure.
Oh, sorry. I wonder why. I wasn't sharing. I didn't press enter. Thank you. Okay. So let's go back. So let's say let's do another one. So let's say this is an inner dance playlist or a journey. Let's make that bigger. So let's say you're able to raise melatonin and acetylcholine and GABA here so that this drops. But here you would release norepinephrine, cortisol, so that you get to release, you activate, and then you drop it here. Oops. So in the actual dream state, okay, understanding that, let's say this is let's say this is a 24-hour day, and cortisol would no cortisol would rise up in the morning, and then it would drop somewhat in the evening before rising up again. So this might be more the 24-hour state. So let's say this nadir, the lowest point is this nadir, yeah, and then it goes up again. So this is the peak, and this might be somewhere, in the morning, early morning. Okay, so what's interesting is when you do, let's say this is you. Okay, so let's say cortisol would drop around in the late afternoon, which is when you don't need that anymore. Let's say mid or late afternoon, cortisol is going down. And then this is when it goes up again. Let's say it starts to go up at around say 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Say 3 a.m. just to be conservative. So we're looking at cortisol. And there are correlations between cortisol and core body temperature. What I'm trying to state here is when let's say you go to sleep at, let's say 9 p.m. Some of you might go to sleep at 9 or 10 p.m. And that's when cortisol is dropping. Core body temperature is dropping as well. The interesting thing here is when you start going into let's say this is when you go to sleep. This is, let's say, sleep onset. So when you have a sleep onset, you would still have a rhythm there. And then you'd have another rhythm there, and then you'd have another rhythm there. You'd have another rhythm there. So when you zoom in, cortisol and core body temperature would actually go up and down. So even though you have this much larger graph of high and low, you would still have mini high and lows here. So when you conduct, let's say, an inner dance, let's say here, let's do it, inner dance here. Let's say it's 6 p.m. in the afternoon. What's gonna happen is you're actually gonna change this whole thing. Like this thing might be advanced, or depending on what you did, it might be delayed. So either you're looking at core body temperature or you're looking at plasma cortisol levels, and you could be looking at plasma melatonin levels as well. So this is how powerful is the work that you can construct a mini wave, but you can actually change this wave. And then if you're looking at this from even like a weekly infradian rhythm or like a 12 months cycle, you might change someone's rhythm or your own rhythm in a macro level because of the micro changes that you're conducting. So yeah, I actually forget your question. I don't even know why I'm saying this. But I hope this makes sense.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay, Gra.
Hi everyone, good morning or night from the other side of the world. Okay, let me go back because I had something to share before body temperature talk. Yeah, it was mostly about our project here with the group on the sleep cycles and sleep playlists. So we are a group of 10, 12, 11 of 11 participants. There are three foreigners, and the rest of them, they are all Filipinos, which is exciting and interesting to be in the space. So yesterday we had our first Zoom call, and it's been only a week since I sent them a playlist. We're basically doing a 2-month journey, and every week they're gonna get access to a playlist. And just since we were like in the first week, I just sent out like a playlist of 30 minutes for them to sleep while sleeping, for them to listen to while sleeping. And it's just 30 minutes, but some of them were already like, no, repeating the entire playlist for the whole night and having like a full-on journey with 30 minutes of playlist. Some of them heard the playlist more than once or only once in the week, and for a period of time, they were already like, can I listen to this while I am doing other stuff? Does it need to be just when I'm sleeping? So they are very like curious to experiment this. And there were some interesting observations. Some of them experienced already or have experiences with circadian disruption and problems with sleep. So, and some of them, they are really just wanting to experiment. So it's a mixed group. But it was interesting already that with this 30 minutes playlist, the ones that are in the group to kind of regulate their cycles, they were already like showing signs that okay, things are really changing. Like there was this one person that he was posing he had difficulty sleep, and he used to also wake up during, I don't know, like around 4 a.m. every night, and then it was very, very hard for him to go back to sleep. But then during the week when this was happening, he would just put on the playlist again when he woke up, and he was just like passing out and going full on sleeping. So he was able to kind of like control the shift, the buttons inside of him, like, okay, I really need more sleep, I really need to stress. And this is something interesting also, because I usually, like, from the facilitator perspective, I usually try to create a space where when this waking up in the middle of the night, okay, let's embrace this and all. But he was actually in a process, and he's been in a process of a lot of stress and a lot of agitation, and he really needs more sleep. So it's like, okay, yes, just press the button one more time and take advantage of this process as well. And it's pretty nice. Another thing that was very interesting is that one participant, she was already like having this very interesting psychedelic journeys during her sleep, and she was able to face fears and face these fears from a different perspective. This for me is like very huge because she's Filipina, and like seeing or hearing this from her, it was like, okay, yes, this is super nice. And because there are a lot of buckled or bottled up stuff and cultural stuff that usually don't allow us to see this space, but then she was already like shifting perspectives into this tiny playlist of 30 minutes. And more than one participant, they were saying or talking about this in between state already. And this, I feel like listening to the call right now, I'm like, okay, yes, I get it more and more, because it was coming from them as well. Like they were a lot saying how they were asleep but awake at the same time, and they were very surprised with this, because it's like, yes, I am there but I'm not there, and I'm here but I'm not here. I am just like in this in between stage. And one interesting thing was that, like, usually we have this idea that if we are active or awake in like or not able to go deep into sleep during nighttime, our energy levels during the day, they will drop and we're not going to be like functional. But the thing is that even though this psychedelic stuff was happening and these in between things were happening during nighttime, they were also experiencing, yes, my energy levels, they are actually like better, even better than when I am like just in normal sleep. So this in between state was already, or this in between consciousness was already like showing some very interesting shifts in their operational stuff, in how they actually function when they are awake. Yeah, and there was also a lot of dream experiences, like current dreams happening, and they are interested also in journaling and finding out like what is it, what is this, what are these patterns. So we also talked a little bit about patterns and dream patterns in the process. We are very excited actually, and I'm encouraging everyone to just keep a journal with this, and journal like what time of the day they are listening to the playlists, and when they are using the playlists for what and what happens. One last thing that was actually very interesting and maybe related to what we are seeing today was that one of the participants, she heard the playlist at nighttime during sleep, and it was the most pleasant thing. And then another experience that she had was during morning, like 5 a.m. I think she woke up at 5 a.m. and she put the playlist, and it was the most awful experience that she had. So it was already an opening for us to also look at the shifts in the body clock, and how this body clock also not interfere, but it also kind of drives our attention, our moods, and our emotions towards the experiences that we are having, either when we are awake or when we are asleep. So yeah, it's just the beginning. This week I'm already sending a 1 hour playlist, and see whatever more is going to come, because if just with 30 minutes we already had like a soup of very deep experiences, and I'm excited to see what happens with more than 30 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I just want to place importance on this, that what we're doing here is prototyping. It's a pilot project. We're merely maybe showing what is possible, so that people from other communities, that this might interest you, and that you yourself might be keen on running a sleep dream program for your clients. So the feedbacks that are coming are going to be important. It's research based. So Gra is gathering hard data. She's prepared some very dense questionnaires that's going to show us some before and after. So if you do this, it would be amazing for you to also do this as a research project that could bring up feedbacks that are specific to your own community. So it really just started. It's been running for about a week. So we will be, let's observe this, because I think this is a next phase that people may not have noticed before. Okay, Christina, it's your turn.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. So this is a big big for me about the sleep, because I had always in my life problems with the sleep. I always sleep very few hours, but now since in Maya, I'm more aware of my sleep and more seeing the consequences maybe. So now in Maya, sometimes I sleep only 1 hour, maybe 3. There are weeks that in the whole week I only sleep 6 hours. There's few. But at the same time, I feel like during the day I have a lot of energy and I can do everything without problems. And then I start to hear the sleep playlist. With some of ones I have problems because I start to have a lot of visions and I cannot sleep. But with the rest and digest is the only one that can sleep. I'm almost addicted with this one. And I hear almost every night. But then I realized that when I sleep like more than normally, or the normal people, in the day I'm super tired. So I don't know if it's this like less level of energy when I sleep more than is because my body is used to sleep less, and now it's like I'm changing some patterns in my body, or I don't know. But I'm like looking at these consequences that I'm having with my sleep now, and yeah, it's interesting to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think maybe we would observe this more in the long term. Like, okay, so there are these manifestations now, but this could be different when we look at it from like after a year, because yeah, you just resigned from your work. You're technically retired. You live in the Philippines now. Came from Spain. You're in a warmer climate that's 24 hours, always the same light and dark cycle. So maybe I would be an advocate of the thought that like changes take a really long time to happen. So let's observe this from the short term, and because you've only started the sleep playlist quite recently, um, normally when we notice the short-term changes, we're observing neurotransmitter activity. But when we're observing changes that are taking place over months, period, or even years, we're observing hormonal changes, which is more the endocrine system. And those patterns tend to last. They don't happen in a short period of time, meaning the changes that happen, we don't notice them until later on. But it's really important to just keep at it, because I think there's so little that we actually know scientifically about the true nature of sleep and wake. So thank you. These are good to bring up. Okay, so anyone else would like to, Oscar? Yeah, you raise your hand.
Thank you. Well, I was enjoying a lot and making some notes. Maybe I will try to put this in order, and I hope that this can be useful for my explanation and also for the participants too. Well, you mentioned in the beginning of the talk about the comparison between how much hours we are sleeping when we are in the very belly and years after, how it's decreasing this measurement of time of sleep. So it was calling my attention how, as more close we are of mother consciousness, of mother touch, the biology is responding in a different way around the body function and the sleeping and chemical manifestation of the sleeping process. So it brought to me some questions, but I'm not really ready to formulate. But maybe the comment can bring another thing in other person in the calling. Another aspect is I'm starting also as a company of a group, and also I'm in my study process being part of this group. And there are some things that they show to me more accessible and others that I'm really in somehow decreasing barriers and creating excitement and enjoyment for addressing and digesting more clearly. But even I was enjoying a lot this calling, and I think that I am still getting more stuff. But was very interesting, Pai, when you were talking about this paradoxical, when we are trying to explain this horizontally on a logical way, it was a very, of course, I have to say, it was very masterful. Thank you so much. But from perspective of chemistry, neurology, but when we go, I'm trying to oversimplify this because it's not, but maybe from the electrical perspective, we are getting different point of view that can be maybe useful to consider, and how the concepts and the behavior of chemistry and endocrine system, they are exactly the manifestation of these electrical oscillations, and how we understand ourselves in one hand, before placing the word energy beings, we also need to call electrochemical beings. We are electrical bodies. So we need to also take a bit distance of the word energy and this metaphysics and this myth or religions or all this aspect, and will be very useful to tapping in basic physics to understand also these behaves, because in the end what we are trying to do with all these mechanisms and the deep understanding of many functions and part of the body and how they are articulating in a complexity, in a complex chemical and functional complexity, how is the process of stabilize electrical patterns in an electrical being in order to access to a tuning or state of consciousness that allow the process that we call self-healing, self-alignment, and how we create this condition for transducing information from different dimensions through the process of electricity as it is. So I found very interesting, for example, in the topic when you were talking about the process of jet lag. Yes, I'm very connected with the concept before innerdance and more deeper here in study with you guys. How the planet is being, but at the same time is a brain, and how shifting regions creating us a different interaction with the basic functions as we are thinkers of the Mother Earth in her surface. We are different societies with different body conditioning and cultural conditioning, how we are even not prevent to still having this relation and function as a part of the planet, a part of life. So when we are able in a practice to shift the perception of light and space, it's like we are moving the person into another time frame of the planet and being in the same place, and how we create conditions for him to be apparently in a sleeping time when don't supposed to be in these conditions, and recreating this process that's supposed to happen in another aspect, and what is happening in real time in this moment in another part of the planet. For example, you mentioned that the peak hour for sessions will be, maybe a good session will be at 11 a.m. So how exactly this 11 a.m. shifting process can happen as they are probably around in the other side of the world, if we are perceiving this and relating this time frame of the daylight with the opposite in the other side of the planet, right? So it was bringing me some insights about how we can displace bodies and consciousness to another areas of the planetary consciousness function of the planet. Another aspect that is how we are highly suggestible, because being able to make someone sleeping when they don't supposed to sleep, and with using music as conducer, with at the same time is electrical patterning coupling. We are working with electricity when we are working with music in this proper space. So we are really understanding how much people, in a safe term, how much manipulate can be in neurology and physiology, and also how much vulnerable we has been to manipulation by also culture, system, and other layers of institution and collective awareness. Another thing is jet lag is here. Okay, so when we are seeing this, you were describing how paradoxical is making certain nucleus regulators operating in both directions at the same time. It's also a way how the electrical motors, they operate in a way how they I like to study some things, a lot of things in physics and also in electricity, on these topics of free energy and all these topics parallel to another layers. That is not the topic here right now. But this has been helping me to understand when they want to create circuits that they can be self-generators, they need to create conditions in both directions. So it happened also in the end, and I'm not oversimplifying this important class that we are receiving, but is how to make this electrical body to operate in a complete range of its electrical capacities, and also how is exchanging information and chemical response. Also, I'm studying a guy that unfortunately was kidnapped by CIA and was disappeared. He was was a scientist and also a psychologist. He's a Mexican guy. His name is Jacobo Greenberg, and he was conducing scientific space, not just in the terms of consciousness. Also, he was following brain research and understanding these neurological fields, how we create the perception and how this pre-space of our neurological culture or conditioning, we create the experience, how we create experience from perception. This guy was able to say these phrases that I will share here. He said that sound is not a physical thing. Sound is a property of consciousness, that consciousness is the one that is able to translate and experiencing. It has nothing to do with also directly with the sense of hearing or the auditory cortex. He said that even people that they was born without the auditory cortex functioning, they are having phenomena of sound in his minds and his consciousness. So it's a very interesting phenomena from the proposal of this researcher about how the perception of reality is also related with he say the noise is a reality, and it's a perceptive reality. It's a meaning that don't have meaning for consciousness, for the human conscious, for the me, for the ego. Noise is something that is there, but it's not meaningful. It's not meaningful directly for my cultural or my conditioning. But this, I want to see here one second. Okay, so how from these theories, I was wondering, okay, how when you mentioned the thing about noise, how the noise become unperceptive in some stages of the process. And it's very interesting because in physics, what happened in the phenomena of consciousness is two waves, they can cancel to each other. Yes, we have wave cancellation, and one bandwidth or one wave is maybe in our perception and our the building of perception is a dimension, is an access to a reality. Frequency is a reality that we are perceiving, and how noise is able to canceling the values that represent for the electrical and for the phenomena of psychological phenomena of the mind is able to cancel the personal noise, and we're entering to a state with different electrical influences and behave inside these brainwave rhythms. He say, well, he don't say this, but I'm here wandering around. Is the cancellation of perceptive realities through noise. We isolate people through noise, as you were saying, so we allow to them to canceling the usual perceptive realities, and maybe in the exercise we are doing similar thing, and maybe I'm not explaining it properly, but it's what in the practice is even happening. And the last thing is, no, it is. I think that I did what I wanted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot there. I think it's like starting with the aspect of electricity. There were these people who were experiencing breatharianism. There was this boy from Nepal, Ram Bahadur Bomjon, who wasn't eating, wasn't drinking, and he wasn't sleeping. He was just there sitting underneath the tree for years. And then you had Wiley Brooks, you had Hiraratan Manek, and then there were so many others who experimented with breatharianism, not eating, not drinking. And they were talking a lot about light, and the body is light. You have Jesus who stopped eating for 40 days, and he said, when your eye is single, your whole body will be filled with light. So I think there is definitely something interesting to look at, where electricity and light might be a better terminology than energy itself, and that to bring up the topic of sleep, that the nearer you are to light, the less you're sleeping. I think it is interesting though then that children sleep more than older people, and somehow come 50, 60, 70 years, people tend to sleep less. But the same is true that older people actually experience REM states. There's less REM experiences at old age. I'm not sure if that's universal, but that's the common feedback. So either when we grow old, we're able to synthesize life in a way that we don't need to do so, and it's quite confusing. Like, we sleep more when we're younger, we sleep less when we're older, but we dream less when we're older. Okay, there's a specific acronym that might be useful here. So one of the most what excites scientists when they want to study sleep, what they look for are people who have sleeping problems. So especially the greatest problem would be in narcolepsy. Okay, narcoleptics are those who are just sleeping all the time, and there's something in their brain, there's something in their persona or their emotions that makes them like need more sleep more than anyone else. Now, what is observed in narcolepsy is it's called the acronym is SORAM, but this basically stands for sleep onset REM period. And I think this we could use to make this practical for what we're studying. So understanding that most people, they need to go through this whole journey before they go into REM. You need to go through non-REM 1, non-REM 2, and then they need to go to non-REM 3. It's quite interesting that there are some people, they dream right away. They actually reverse this whole cycle. So that maybe like REM would be here, and then then they wouldn't experience non-REM 1 so much, but then they would go into like a deep slow wave sleep after going through REM, and then they go back to REM. So understanding that actually it's both narcoleptics and the the opposite in narcoleptics. It's I forget the name. Like for some reason, some people are going into dreaming. It's like either you're super sleep deprived, you go straight into REM, or you're going straight into sleep all the time. You're going straight into REM. This would be useful for those who are conducting the processes, that depending on your participants, you might go for a more classic non-REM 1 to non-REM 3 REM period. But when you have been doing this for certain participants who are so used to the energy and they're dropping into REM quite quickly, you might change your playlisting style. It's either you decide, because they're going straight into activation so much, that maybe you add more, like your REM period might be a lot longer, and then your REM state might be shorter. Understanding that REM, wait, let me look for some graphs here. It's my cursor. Wait, let me just unplug the iPad so it doesn't give me this. It's really annoying. Sorry. I'm trying to access like this app. Okay. Slowly. Okay. Now we get lost. There. Okay. Just here. So this is important. Maybe we've brought this up a long time, but REM periods are normally longer at the. This is technically when temperature is dropped and melatonin is high and cortisol is low. People aren't able to dream long and fast. Maybe because electricity is down, magnetism is high, and people. But what we're seeing is there are probably human beings, and that could include you, where REM periods are longer, even at sleep onset. This is what SOREM means. Like at sleep onset, as soon as you go to sleep, are you one of those people who are dreaming longer and faster compared to other human beings? This is one of the reasons why we are conducting the sleep playlist systems, because the playlists are designed to help lengthen REM and allow them to happen earlier at sleep onset. So I would probably guess that many people living this normative lifestyle, because of what we're eating, because of our lifestyles, because we're stressed out, we're over planning, REM has been pushed away, like farther and farther away, because of, let's say, artificial lighting. What's happening with a lot of people is when they wake up at night, they're reaching for their phone. So not only are they receiving light from a screen, they're also receiving information. So they're going into their emotional parts of the brain. They're going for the frontal cortex, and they're losing the REM state even more. So I think one interesting concept to look at, if we were to study sleep science in a spiritual way, I think if we were to bring up something something in the sciences that's going to be controversial. Now, ancient people had this very strange theory, and this has still to do with the eyes, okay? Okay, you have the eyes, you have the retina, and then through the retina, you have the optic nerve that then would connect either to the suprachiasmatic nucleus or the thalamus, which would then go to the visual cortex. So this theory is called the emission theory, or the extramission theory of light, which is to say, so this is more the sorry, this is the intromission. No. So a lot of people like the word transmission. This is another take. Intromission is a modern theory that says that you are absorbing light that is coming from the outside, and then that is now traveling through the optic chiasma. Either in the SCN, you enter into the photoganglionic retinal parts of the eye that then is very sensitive to light and dark, that measures the clock. But if it goes through the thalamus, it would be more on recognizing the image, like what does the image mean? So this is the normative point of view now. But when you have a spiritual experience, there's something in the spiritual experience that actually reverses this. And I think this is when you start going into light language, really deep inner dance processes where retrocausality happens. So the extramission theory of light, this began with early thinkers like Plato believed in this, even Leonardo da Vinci believed in this. They believe that the eye is not receiving light. The spiritual and ancient belief is that the eye is actually sending out light, that the eye is unto itself a source of light, and you are influencing like what you're seeing. It could be like objects, it could be so for me, like I don't like bringing this up because it really goes against most sciences, physics included, or the science of vision. But from the spiritual experience, there's this sensation almost, and you guys can share if you've experienced this. It's almost like you're the source, and you're sending out information. You are creating what you are experiencing, and it's coming from inside. And it's interesting to understand that the ancient cultures actually believed in this. It's called the emission theory, that you're emitting light. So in terms of retrocausality, you know how in causality time goes forward. So if you do reverse time, what you have is the word emit. So when retrocausal realities begin to happen, you're not really absorbing the information, you're producing the information, and it depends on your perception. Like, how are you seeing the world? It's not just about what you're looking at and how you're seeing it, but how are you perceiving the world coming from you as a creative being? I remember this part of the Bible where the critics of Jesus were saying, okay, your disciples are eating like bad food, they're not praying according to rule of religious law. And Jesus said, it doesn't actually matter as much what goes into you, what goes inside you. What matters is what you put out, like what do you show, what is produced from inside you. So I believe that when we do become light beings, and I do believe that the journey into REM, into dream, and the thing is, when you dream awake, you don't sleep as much because you're becoming light. You're eating light, you're producing light. Then I think what depresses people, what brings about victimization, like trauma, is this understanding that I received the world, I ate the world. And a lot of circadian rhythm science is based on the idea of entrainment. So when Oscar does talk about how easily manipulable we are by what's called the Zeitgebers, whether it be sound, temperature, the words people say, light and dark, I think us becoming dreamers, we are learning to entrain for more internal mechanisms. So the work that we do is kind of okay because we are not just being entrained by a master or a guru or like a teacher or someone who has more energy than we do. we are doing this to learn more about how are we constructing like a universe. In the past, when psychologists became more interested in dreams, they were interested in the interpretation of dreams. That when that image comes up, what does it mean? But I think because we're learning more and more about not just who we are, but what we are, we're not so interested about the interpretation of the dream. We're more interested in how are we dreaming at all. We're not so interested in what is that meaning. What does it mean? We're being given more the power to create that meaning. Like that's what it means to become a dreamer, and not just to be the dream or the dreaming. To really learn how to dream, and the inner dance is a close encounter with what it really means to dream. Yeah, that's why sleep onset REM period is interesting, because I do believe that there are many people in this practice that can go straight into REM state. So what do you do with that? You know, if people are activating wake dream, and then there's somewhere in between, like all the time. So I think we're studying, we are like training ourselves. We're structuring the energy. We're growing in order to hold both domains more responsibly, more integratively. I think that's why we're doing this, to learn to reorganize the earth, accessing the gifts of wake. And there's so many gifts in sleep that we haven't tapped into, all those dimensionalities that's accessible to death and slow wave sleep. That consciousness, I feel, is what is waking up. Like sleep is waking up, and it wasn't sleep. It was consciousness. So one important word that I hold to myself to just bring focus is the word continuity. I feel that the old definition of sleep was closer to disruption, interruption. Like when we go to sleep, then we escape and something stops. I think if we become more conscious beings, when I wake up, especially more and more the last months and the last years, I actually have so much continuity, and it was coming from yesterday and the days before and the years before, where there's no discrepancy anymore. It's like I feel like I'm processing so much while I'm sleeping. And in that sleep, there's a consciousness at work. I think we didn't respect sleep as much as we are beginning to now. That there's something about sleep as a consciousness. So when we say sleep itself is waking up, it's so mysterious, so ominous, scary. It's like, okay, like what would that mean if like sleep woke up? So I feel inner dance is like a glimpse. It's like a peek. It's like, hey, you, I've been here all this time, and I'm not alien. I'm not weird. You actually came from me. You were born as me. Everyone is born as this, and we think of it as the universe, the cosmos, all black with a bunch of white dots. But this is the source. This is where we came from, where everything was happening all at the same time. But it can't be rushed. You know, maybe when it was rushed, that's when people got diagnosed as schizophrenia or psychosis or this and that. Actually, if we acclimatize to it, if we get used to it, I think sleep-wake disruption began to happen when we pushed away the darkness, when we came into plentitude of cheap artificial lighting. We pushed away the darkness. That's what humans wanted to do, and the darkness is like for many the unknown. It's what is scary. It's death-like. But when we become okay with the darkness, you know, like you get people to lay down, they close their eyes, and then they're okay with not knowing, yet starting to know, because the unknown starts to come, and it's not so scary. It's not unfriendly. It's not the abyss. It's actually like an aspect. It's a consciousness. And you can approach it in any way. It could be like when you're studying, there's like a consciousness. It can be slow. And then there's a part that's like super excitable, like a kid wanting it fast, and but if you're not scared, it's slow. But it could be like a spiritual or emotional situation where maybe something threatening happens, and you can either come from like a slow wave, like slow, I'm old, I'm really ancient, and I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to collapse that into like a point. It's like it's vast. But there's a part of us that's like quite young that would rather like judge and like hurry and like try to grasp on to it. So I think what it means that sleep is waking up is a vibration is waking up, and that's a consciousness. So along with this notion of like getting interested in electricity, because in physics, the other force is magnetism. I feel that the dream state is the black hole. It's the high magnetism that expands time so you can explore like any aspect of reality in like a Groundhog Day loop where, okay, that day is not a day, it's like infinite variations, parallel universes, holographic realities, like hiding inside time. So if we wake up, sleep, and we do it safely, William Dement, probably the most important sleep science researcher in history, said that we go to sleep every night so we can safely and quietly be insane. That's what he said. The reason why we go to sleep is so that we can safely and quietly be insane every night. I think we're safely and quietly inserting interdimensionality that human minds couldn't handle before. So we're rebuilding the brain, we're rebuilding the body, we're creating access to a lot more depth, a lot more information that we couldn't handle. And so that's the reason why a lot of people might be sleeping less. Or the thing with lucid dreaming is when you're awake while you're asleep, it's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is not deactivated. The default mode network is not deactivated when you're sleeping. I would be really interested to observe people who are going into that in between. That's why I think the program that Gura is beginning to run, this is something we should all study, that you might be interested in running an in-between sleep-wake program as well for your own community. And let's see where that goes. I'm really excited about that. Like inner dancing while you're sleeping, like what does that do? What does that mean? I don't actually know. I just have the feedbacks that we've collated. So yeah, amazing. Oscar,
So-
did you raise your hand again? My eyes are open.
A very last thing, when you say that you don't want to tapping in the thing of emission of the eyes because it's not a lot of scientific proof, I just want to say that the double sleep experiment, which is one of the most important awaken processing science and human consciousness, is based that it's not properly because the eye is the vision. Also, this Jacobo Greenberg guy, Mexican scientist, say the vision is also a property of consciousness. So when we are seeing, it's consciousness which is affecting. And so in the middle of the core of the scientific community, this double sleep experiment is really validating that there's something happening through the eyes, and it's not just a metaphysical syncretism or something like that. Thank you so much for this inspiring explanation, and I'm very curious to see if there's how will be possible to participate in the sleeping process, because I have really problems with the sleep, but I has been craziness and my madness. Oh, sorry for the things. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your patience, Pai.
Okay. I would be excited for Grad to lead those conversations both within Intensive and in Studios Mundos. I think maybe in a couple of weeks she would have enough feedback, but I'm really, really excited. I think it's the way to go. Because based on already what she's saying, people are opening up to areas inner dancey that they would not have been open to, and she's accessing it through their dream spaces. it's accessible. We're talking about like doctors, some of the participants used to be nuns. They had left the Catholic order. They're, but like people you wouldn't expect having spiritual experiences. She's starting with this super simple. Okay, 20 minutes. Anyone else would like to share or hold a question or anything, ideas, insights? Okay, so I hope this is a really good starting point. I've been wanting to go into this topic for a while. The reason why we brought up sleep now is like the last call, this paves the way for the different systematicities, being the limbic, the neocortical, and the autonomic, and the endocrine. Sleep involves them all. It's a master topic. It opens up for all kinds of inquiry, like in the long term. You want to study yourself, you want to study the human. Sleep is a really big doorway into a rather large room. So I hope that this call just lets you be more and more interested in this. And yeah, like let's keep discussing it. So yeah, if anyone, if we're all good, let's just unmute ourselves and we can close the call. And there's another one the next day for those who would like to join that. Thank you for joining. And yeah.
You. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.